Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 23rd of January 2019, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. Your host today, Mike Robinson, myself, Brian Gerrish.
Well, we're going to get straight on, Brian, with Yemen, because the British government has announced, or Jeremy Hunt, the Foreign Secretary, has announced new UK funding to support the United Nations peace process in Yemen. And I say peace process very much with tongue-in-cheek, I think. So they've announced another £2.5 million in additional funding to the peace process. This uplift in spending, as they describe it, comes from the Conflict, Security and Stability Fund, and of course that is the fund which was used to, finance the White Helmets over the years in Syria. And apparently this is going to help establish the United Nations Civilian Coordinator's Office, and this is following agreements made between the parties at the peace talks in Stockholm in December. So that's going on, and he announced this. He said that, sorry, I'm showing the wrong thing there, but you can see what he said there. Last week's Security Council vote and today's announcement of an additional £2.5 million UK funding are an instrumental part of the process. Well, joining us today, we have Hussein Al-Bukaiti, joining us from Sana'a in Yemen. Welcome to the program, Hussein.
Hi, thank you.
What do you think of this announcement? What do you think of, what's your view of the peace process within the United Nations? Obviously, Conflict, Security and Stability Fund, as I say, was used to finance the White Helmets in Syria. Are you seeing the same type of money coming into Yemen?
Of course, because we have seen that in Yemen, Al-Qaeda and ISIS is in a coalition with the Saudi-backed coalition and some Yemeni forces loyal to Saudi and United Arab Emirates, and they are fighting Ansarullah al-Houthi. So I'm sure that this money, if not all, some of it will end up in those hands. We've seen that some of the weapons sold by countries like United States, UK to Saudi Arabia, they are delivering those weapons to all the groups on the ground that are fighting the Houthi, and some of these groups are Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And I wanna just remind the people who are watching that the Associated Press has released a report months ago saying that United Arab Emirates and Saudi has struck deals with Al-Qaeda, recruited Al-Qaeda, paid them money to fight the Houthi, especially in an area called Al-Bayda province and in the west coast in Yemen. Most of the fighters around Hodeidah are extremists, Salafis, and Al-Qaeda fighter. And the BBC, in one report, have shown, BBC Arabic, have shown footage of Al-Qaeda fighters side by side next to the Saudi-backed forces. But to be honest, to send like 2.5 million is nothing. This is actually, as we say in Yemen, it adds insult to injury, because it's the United Kingdom who provided those weapons, provided logistic supplies. Some UK staff personnel are in Saudi Arabia, assisting them with the bombardment of Yemen. According, I believe, to the Guardian or the Independent, the weapons sales in the United Kingdom has increased by 500%. And you can imagine during this war, and you can imagine to send 2.5 million, and it's not to help Yemen. They could have bought food with it and help it. And one simple thing UK can do to stop this war, which is, it's not gonna cost them, is to stop supplying the war to Saudi Arabia, or to have at least pressure on Saudi Arabia to condemn Saudi Arabia. From the beginning of the war, I haven't heard a single clear condemnation that has mentioned the Saudi name from the United Kingdom. 16,000 people have died, and we haven't heard anything.
Absolutely. Now, let's look a little bit about the rise of Al-Qaeda and ISIS. You're saying that the West is financing, funding, arming, and promoting these groups to come into Yemen. So what is the intention? Do you think they intend to cause the same type of continue the chaos there, but cause the same type of operation to take place as happened in Syria? Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly that has been happening in the course of all intervention, outside intervention in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Syria, in Libya, and now in Yemen. What the United States and UK and some Western country like France, they always want to make a new hub for Al Qaeda because a lot of those fighters are foreigners. Some of them came from the United States, from UK and France, so they don't want them to go back to their country. They started Afghanistan, and then after that they took them to Iraq and then to Syria. I mean, there was no Al Qaeda in Iraq or ISIS. There was no Al Qaeda or ISIS or even extremists in Syria. The same thing in Libya, and now is Yemen. And I believe that Egypt it could follow. And to be honest with you, it's really clear that United States and UK is back in Saudi and they are back in Al Qaeda because there are 4 officials in Hadi government, which is based in Saudi Arabia, who are in the US Treasury list for supporting Al Qaeda. One of them is Abdul Wahab Al Humaygani. He is the advisor of Hadi, and he was a member of the Saudi-led coalition delegation into Geneva. He has met Ban Ki-moon. He has met Ismail Wuld Sheikh, and he's based in Saudi Arabia. So how can the United Kingdom actually support Saudi Arabia, which is recruiting those type of people? And
oh, look, hold on 1 second. Let me just run through these here because we have a few graphics here to show this. Because this is you've sent me this through this morning. This is the U.S. Department of Treasury press center. And what this press release is showing is that they are designating certain people as being linked to Al Qaeda, Al Nusra Front, AQAP, and of being fundraisers and facilitators. So first of all, we have here a Mr. Al Qaisi. Now you'll have to correct me with my pronunciation, but this is the Department of Treasury listing him as a terrorist. We've got the United Nations listing him as a terrorist. And as you say, the Hadi president, the so-called President Hadi, who claims to be president of Yemen but isn't, photographed with this gent. And then we have the next one here. This is who have we got here? Well, this is Ali Abkar. We've got another one here. Khalid Al. So you'll have to tell me how to pronounce these names, Hussein.
Okay. The first one that you shown his picture with Hadi. This is when Hadi appointed him as the governor of Al Bayda. His name is Naif Al Gaisi. He was appointed after the war while Hadi was in Saudi Arabia, and he was in as Al Bayda governor till July 2017. And the next one that you his name is Khalid Al Irada.
Okay, and that's right. And so we've got him pictured with this is President Hadi's deputy. Is that correct?
Yes, this is Ali Muhsin. He's the vice president of Hadi, and Khalid Al Irada. He's the brother of the governor of Marib. And Marib, the gas and oil in Marib, it counts as 85% of Yemeni budget used to come from Marib. And he's the right-hand man of Ali Muhsin Al-Ahmar in Marib. And just imagine how much money now they have, and those people are supporters of Al-Qaeda, as the United States has declared.
Yes, okay, and the next one we've got here is Abd al-Wahab Muhammad Abd al-Rahman al-Humekani. Is that correct? And yes. Here we have him, as you say, shaking hands with Ban Ki-moon. But you know, if we put this one back up, this is the U.S. Department of the Treasury labeling him as being Al Qaeda supporter in Qatar and Yemen. So how does that work? That we have the past Secretaries General of the United Nations shaking hands with people that are labeled as terrorists by the U.S. government?
I mean, this shows you exactly how the United Nations is actually built. If the United States will interfere in a country, and if they will try to hunt someone and they will say he's a real terrorist and it is maybe against the United States, then the United Nations will admit that he is a terrorist. But this guy, he's actually, why they are shaking hands? Because he's actually fighting and helping the Saudi and United Kingdom and United States in fighting the Houthi. They are helping United Arab Emirates to control the coast of Yemen. So I'm sure they will keep shaking hands with those people because they are their friend.
So look, mainstream media coverage of this. How many mainstream media journalists and outlets are actually joining the dots here and sort of pointing out that these people are terrorist linked? You've sent me this one from Le Figaro, but is there anybody else that has actually highlighted this problem?
Maybe if you type this name in the internet, you can find the news that is saying that the U.S. Treasury has designated them as Al-Qaeda supporter. But you will not find a news in Western media like saying what position those people are doing. Where are they now? With who they are working, against whom they are fighting. And this is the news that actually the mainstream media keep it away from the people in Western country.
Okay, look, Hussein, thank you very much for joining us today. We'll move on at this point, but just before you go, how do you see the future? What needs to happen at this point to get this war stopped?
To be honest with you, when in Yemen, especially after the brutal killing of Jamal Khashoggi, we have seen this pressure against Saudi Arabia and from the media as well. We had kind of hope that finally Saudi will pay to what they did to Yemen and what they did to Khashoggi. But as soon as United States declared that they will not do anything and United Kingdom hasn't done anything, people here in Yemen were really disappointed because they said, look, they caught them red-handed, chopping that guy, killing him. So I don't think they can do anything about what's happening in Yemen. And I don't know, like the United Kingdom have blood on their hand, and I hope that the people of the United Kingdom must do anything. Just they have to stop supplying Saudi with weapons. 250,000 Yemeni civilians has died because of blockade. One child died every 10 minutes, according to UNICEF. 16,000 died because of the direct bombing. The entire Yemen infrastructure has been destroyed. The United Nations last year, they said they could, in Yemen, the humanitarian coordinator of United Nations in Sana'a have said, when they asked him how many people have died, he said, we know it's 10,000. They said, no, but this was last year. The year before, he said no, because the health system has collapsed. Just imagine a health system collapsed so bad that you cannot record how many people are dying, and you can just imagine the situation across Yemen.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, Hussein. Thank you for joining us today, and we will be in touch. No doubt you'll be on soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Brian, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's outrageous, Mike. It's terrible. It's outrageous. But I think the key to starting to sort the problem out is to get the truth and the facts out as to what's actually happening on the ground. Because, of course, the illustrious BBC doesn't want to report accurately what's happening in Yemen, neither do many of the other Western news sources. And I think it was a few months ago we had talk of some UK government initiative to stop the war in Yemen. I remember seeing something about it. That's all disappeared into the long grass. And as this gentleman says, what's causing the trouble is that we are pumping in the weapons and the munitions, along with the Americans, and the French, of course, will be highly active. And we're not calling Saudi Arabia into account. So a number of simple steps, but I think starting off with people understanding the scale of the devastation in Yemen.
Absolutely. Right. Let's move on then to Aachen. And there we go. The deal has been done. Apologies for the video there, but the deal has been done and the Aachen Treaty has been signed. So what has happened is France and Germany now a single state. Well, that remains to be seen. It's being presented by the authors and by the mainstream media as a second Elysee Treaty. And of course, that's referring to the treaty signed by Admiral de Gaulle in '63. Well, it's aiming at forming a a political bloc between France and Germany that, well, what tells the Europeans what to do. It's going to build a European military force outside of NATO, and it's going to deal with their economies and so on. So, well, the other 25 EU partners aren't so happy about it. I'm not sure that we could call them partners, but look, if you want to know what this is all about, get onto the UK Column website. The article is the Aachen Treaty. Germany and France become all but a single state. And this highlights well, in fact, it's an English translation of the entire treaty if you want to have a look at it. Chapter 1 is all about European affairs. It says the two states will consult regularly at all levels before the major European Union deadlines, seeking to establish common positions and to agree to coordinate ministerial speeches. They will coordinate on the transposition of European Union law into national law. Isn't that something that we've just done? Yeah, anyway, okay. Chapter 2 is about peace, security and development, so that's the military side of things. Chapter 5 is about sustainability, climate, environment and economic affairs. And they're talking about achieving their climate goals, advanced energy transition, and so on. So basically breaking down the boundaries between. Now, as I say, it's not viewed terribly well by the other 25 member states of the EU, and here's just an example of it. This is an Italian organisation. And they say the Aachen Treaty is at best irrelevant. At worst, it wants to recreate a sort of Carolingian empire in which Aachen was the capital. It degenerated immediately after its creation, becoming one of the most illusory creations in European history. If you want another historical parallel, we could see it with the 7 Years' War and the Bourbon-French alliance in a major part of the 17th century. It was a period of bloody wars that led to the slow decadence of the two powers which, as today, tried to rule Europe with their agreement, succeeding only in rotting it and blowing it up with the French Revolution. Jupiter Macron and the German housewife would like to enter the history books. So did Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, the Bourbons and the Habsburgs. So that's their attitude to it. But following on from David Scott's initial analysis and spoken treaty is what the article says about the Aachen Treaty. Of course, the key part of this is this European Defence Union, and something that we're trying to highlight here is that this has been something that the British government has driven through its foreign policy since the end of the Second World War. So, anybody that on the British side that claims that they don't want to see military union in Europe isn't really paying attention.
Not paying attention. Well, we can dig in a bit deeper. I think viewers of a weak disposition should probably turn away now, but let's bring this image up on screen. And this is what it's really about, isn't it? A powerful picture, actually. Do I trust those eyes? I don't think so. But we have now finally got some newspapers beginning to talk about EU military unification. We don't often blow our trumpet for what the UK column has achieved, but I think that the reporting and the analysis by the UK column is now starting to bear fruits, because we are seeing this subject coming into discussion in the so-called mainstream press. So we've got the Telegraph here. Of course, notice that it's still called the European Army, and notice the word fantasy that's put next to it. But nevertheless, the Telegraph's been forced to report something on this. We've got something else with the Express here. Emmanuel Macron confirms EU army plans. Europe new shield against the world. Are we in a state, Mike, where if we live in Europe, we're terrified of every other part of the world that's outside of Europe? It appears to be what's happening here. Significantly, they said that Merkel was booed as she made calls for a European army. We're going to check on what she actually said, because we know from previous speeches that when the word military has been used, or even defence, this has been translated as European army. And of course, it isn't an army, it's full military unification. So we will check on this. And we're going to say that the UK column has led on this vital subject. We lose Britain's military into the European Union. Even if Brexit was declared, we still leave our military behind. So you can see on the UK column website here If we just pop that down, Mike.
sorry.
We've got a wealth of information, including Mike's EU military unification timeline, which is there on the right of your screen. But apparently this organisation says it's all complete nonsense. This is full fact. We've commented on this organisation before, but here's their latest effort, the hunt for an EU army. Claim there are plans for an EU army. Conclusion, EU member countries work together on military matters, but the EU doesn't have its own military capabilities. At least a few European politicians do support the creation of an EU army, but that would need unanimous approval. This is the most I'm running out of words for it. Let's just follow a bit more through. So it starts off with words from Nick Clegg. This is a dangerous fantasy. The idea there's going to be a European Air Force or a European Army is simply not true. Would you trust Nick Clegg? I don't think so. We've got a UKIP one. The EU has a long record of creating institutions through the back door, and the creation of an EU army will be no different. So it's interesting that they have these quotes. But where have they gone? The EU doesn't currently have an army. It does encourage military cooperation between member countries, which already run joint operations under an EU banner. And some European politicians would like to see this take the form of a standalone EU armed forces. But it says that basically the European military force is still a matter for national governments. There's nothing to worry about. It's untrue that there's an EU defence union being created, even though, Mike, the European Union is saying that's the case itself.
Almost every speech by Federica Mogherini now includes some reference to this. She is absolutely determined that this is what is going to happen. And of course, she, as the foreign secretary, effectively, of the European Union, gets to decide where it goes.
Yeah.
Sorry, just to make one final point on this, because many people keep mentioning NATO, and you know it is how many years? 4 years, 5 years since Federica Mogherini and Jens Stoltenberg began the process of working out exactly what the lines of demarcation are going to be between NATO and the European unified military forces. This is something which has been long planned for.
Long planned for, and indeed, as UKIP said, it was going to be put in place a step at a time, piecemeal. Those pieces are already in place, so this is not a vision for the future. This is a work in progress, which is now accelerating. But apparently this professional organisation, Full Fact, simply can't get to grips with it. Now let's remind ourselves about this organisation. I recommend that you get onto their website and actually have a look at the people who claim that they are there standing up for what is factually correct and what is truth. Will Moy is the director. We'll come on to him in a minute. But this is one of the journalists of their fact checkers that wrote this outrageous article claiming there was no plan for an EU military union. Now, one of them was Claire Milne on screen. She claims to be a senior fact checker, but up until May 2016, she was working as a researcher in the Office of the Prince of Wales, where she covered issues such as housing and planning and heritage projects. She's also worked in a consultancy in Scotland, providing advice to the not-for-profit sector, and she studied history. So this lady has, in my opinion, very few qualifications to be commenting on what's happening to do with the military in the European Union, and she's got her facts wrong anyway. Maybe she should stick to matters connected to the Prince of Wales and history. But let's go for the main man. This is him, Conor James McKinney. Now, I was fascinated because he appears to be some sort of consultant. I couldn't find his name on the Full Fact website itself. This is his Twitter page. I'm not sure what you make of that banner image, Mike. I find something distasteful about it. I'm not quite sure what it is. We've got a QC or a judge possibly and two young men, but not sure what that's about. But this is what he said. here we are, a tweet that went out about 11, 12 hours ago. Wrote this about an EU army a few years back. Point still stands. Some EU politicians saying they'd like one. Doesn't make it a real thing, given member states' veto power. And then what I noticed was the paragraph quoted there is also in the full fact article, but he wrote this a few years ago. So it's like they've taken this and they've decided to rework it in order to try and undermine the fact that we're now getting the truth coming out. And this is the main man, Will Moy. The reason why nobody should trust this organisation is back in 2013, the Telegraph here exposed him as having withheld information to the Leveson inquiry. Andrew Gilligan writes on how high-profile campaigners for press regulation were economical with their truth. This is what he said altogether. Will Moy, the head of PhilFact, a non-partisan group campaigning against inaccuracy in the media, told Lord Justice Leveson that his organisation was constituted as a charity, and in the process of registering as a charity, and as such operated under a statutory public benefit obligation. If you go to the final paragraph, it says, in fact, in July 2011, 7 months before Mr. Moy testified, PhilFact had been refused registration as a charity after another judge heard that it lacked the requisite objectivity and was not established for the public benefit. So why would anybody trust an organisation headed up by this gentleman when either he didn't know his facts or he was deliberately withholding information from that inquiry? Why would you trust him?
Well, why would you indeed? But in fact, as we mentioned a day or two ago, Facebook is trusting him and his organisation to check all the facts that appear on UK Facebook timelines. Any flagged stories which people consider to be possibly untrue will go to PhilFact for fact checking. Well, they're getting probably a reasonable sum of money for that. But don't worry, they're a charity.
They're a charity. Well, before we go on this subject, we'll just remind people of the background to what went on here. And let's remember that Demos, the Marxist organisation, which was also supported by Jeff Morgan, Julian Middleton, Common Purpose. In 2002, they had a project, an examination of the relationship between government and the media. So just a coincidence that Demos in 2002 said there was going to be some form of review of the media. And we've shown in this diagram that was from 2013, how Common Purpose worked in the background to set up the Media Standards Trust. David Cameron was a full supporter of Common Purpose. Hacked Off was set up as a protest group against the media. And of course, at that time, one of the directors was Will Moy himself. And they ultimately gave evidence against mainstream media to the Leveson inquiry. And if we get in a bit deeper, we had the Dirty Three, Hacked Off, the Media Standards Trust and PhilFact as a sort of engine to drive this massive attack on free speech in the United Kingdom. And yet this organisation is now trying to claim that the EU, it's obvious to see what's going on, which is full EU military unification. PhilFact is trying to claim it's not happening. So we say it's faux fact. You can have a look at this article on the UK Column website itself. And we're going to say, well, can you trust PhilFact? It's simply not credible and not to be trusted. And if you support our view on this organisation, then the best way to express your own personal view is to get onto Twitter and start posting your thoughts and comments on PhilFact's Twitter page.
Okay, brief reminder that we can only do what we're doing with your help. So if you're not already a member or subscriber to the UK Column, then please do join us, and you can do that at ukcolumn.org/community. Now, Brian, just when you think that things can't get any worse and that the full facts have already come out about the Skripal affair, there's more. But before we get onto that, let's just mention these two. because, well, Jeremy Hunt is very excited that the EU has just imposed sanctions under a brand new chemical weapons regime against the suspects in the Salisbury poisoning. That's Alexander Petrov and Ruslan Borisov. And other GRU leaders. This is apparently the result of hard work between UK and EU, and it sends a clear message that the world condemns chemical weapons use wherever it occurs. I found it interesting that Jeremy Hunt had scuttled off to the European Union to impose sanctions within a few weeks of us apparently leaving the European Union. Surprised we're not applying our own sanctions. But anyway, here he was looking very excited about the whole thing. He said, I think we've had a very important day in terms of our desire to make the use of chemical weapons internationally a taboo. So it's not going to be illegal, it's just a taboo.
Well, and of course they're proving very useful for the French government in the yellow vest troubles, aren't they?
Well, yes. The announcement of the extension of EU sanctions to 5 Syrian individuals involved in their use in Syria, but is very significantly for the UK, the extension of the sanctions regime to 4 individuals in the GRU. That's the intelligence arm of the Russian armed forces, including the head and the deputy head of the GRU. Theresa May said we're going to go after the GRU to stop their malign activities and the use of chemical weapons in Salisbury. So there you go, that's what he had to say. Well, look, over the last few days there have been some spectacular articles in the mainstream press. So let's start with this one from The Guardian. Novichok poisoning victims first helped by teenage girl. Abigail McCourt, 16, gave first aid to Sergei and Julia Skripal after they collapsed. And what are they saying? Abigail McCourt was with her family when she saw the 66-year-old former KGB spy and his daughter collapsed on a bench in the Maltings shopping centre, or at the Maltings shopping centre in Salisbury on the afternoon of 5th March last year. The 16-year-old thought Sergei Skripal had suffered a heart attack and alerted her mother, Alison, and they went to administer first aid. It was my brother's birthday, she told the local radio station, and we were out celebrating and we were coming home and I saw them on the bench. At this point, we were still people were still walking past and I don't think anyone had really noticed them. I told my mum because I thought he was having a heart attack. We went over and it developed from there. We went home and the next day I was talking to some friends about it, and at break someone Snapchatted me and said, is this the thing you were talking about? And I was, okay, wow. And so apparently the 16-year-old and her mother gave CPR to these two as they were lying as a result of Novichok poisoning. And although apparently she did undergo tests, according to this Guardian article, neither she nor her mother was contaminated by this nerve agent. But the question then is, who was her mother? Well, her mother is this lady, Colonel Alison McCourt, who is the Chief Nursing Officer for the British Army. So, Brian, that was all very coincidental, amazingly coincidental that the Chief Nursing Officer should just happen to be walking past at the moment the Skripals were poisoned, apparently.
I smiled when you told me first thing this morning about this particular one, Mike. I'm still smiling now because words really fail me, but I have some questions, and that is presumably these two were well equipped with baby wipes because they were handling and touching both of the contaminated victims. We have police officers who spend a lot of time in hospital as a result of touching them, but I don't remember hearing anything about these two being in hospital.
No, they went for tests and that was all.
So it depends who you are.
Well,
when
apparently
you touch
if you
these
are
people.
Chief Nursing Officer, you're immune, perhaps.
Right.
But anyway, it gets better because on Sunday, the Telegraph published this. Kremlin accused of laying false trail linking Sergei Skripal to ex-MI6 officer behind the Trump dossier. And they say, well-placed sources now believe that the plot to kill Colonel Skripal may have included a black ops attempt to sow doubt on the veracity of the explosive dossier that claims Donald Trump received Kremlin backing. The year before the attempted assassination of Colonel Skripal, a mysterious post on LinkedIn suggested his MI6 handler, who is not being named, this is what the Telegraph is saying, worked as a senior analyst at Orbis Business Intelligence, the firm that produced the Trump dossier. But a number of sources have told the Telegraph that the LinkedIn profile is false, it never properly existed at all, and that Skripal's MI6 handler never worked for Orbis. It is now suspected that the LinkedIn profile was created by the GRU, the Russian military intelligence unit, which tried to kill Colonel Skripal with Novichok nerve agent. They go on to say, a well-placed source said, by creating this link, they are suggesting that MI6 are involved with the dossier, the Trump dossier, or Skripal, or both. It adds to the confusion and acts as a wedge between the White House and Downing Street. It is exactly the kind of operation the Russians would order to sow confusion. So this is just an incredible article, Brian. I don't know that there's a single word of truth in it. But anyway, the point is they don't want to name the MI6 handler of Sergei Skripal, and the media doesn't want to name this man in general. They've never wanted to name him. And so the question is the name of Pablo Miller under some kind of D notice? Because that's who we're talking about. So really what the Telegraph is claiming in this article is that the Russians decided 14 months ahead that they were going to set up the poisoning of Skripal, and that in January 2017 they made up a LinkedIn profile which was linking Sergei Skripal's MI6 handler Pablo Miller to Christopher Steele's Orbis Business Intelligence, somehow in order to discredit the dodgy dossier, which to date has resulted in no evidence of any kind of collusion between Trump and the Russians, or any attempt by the Russians to mess about with the US general election. So this is an unbelievably disgraceful piece of fake news, I believe, and perhaps faux facts should get on top of that one. But
I think that's pretty unlikely.
yes,
Pretty unlikely.
Indeed. But since this article has probably come via the Integrity Initiative, I thought it appropriate just to bring everybody up to date on the Integrity Initiative's website. It's very unfortunate because they have had to say that all content has been temporarily removed from the Integrity Initiative website, pending an investigation into the theft of data from the Institute for Statecraft and its program, the Integrity Initiative. Initial findings indicate that the theft was part of a campaign to undermine the work of the Integrity Initiative in researching, publicising and countering the threat to European democracies from disinformation and other forms of hybrid warfare. The website will be relaunched shortly. In the meantime, we expect to be able to publish an analysis of the hack and its significance in the near future. We are keen to trace both the source of the hack and the use to which our data, some genuine, some falsified, has been put. And they then ask if you've got any information to let them know. But this is the key sentence, isn't it, Brian? We're keen to trace both the source of the hack, of course, and the use to which our data has been put. So they're tracing the use to which their data has been put, including perhaps articles by the UK column and others. And perhaps this is going to result in some kind of coordinated attack on the organisations that, or the people that have published information about Integrity Initiative.
Yeah. Well, we've certainly been hearing that this is a possibility. Will be interesting to see what happens. One thing that's for sure, it's a lot easier to report facts and truth than it is to get into this mess that we see surrounding the UK government at the moment. Do I believe the UK government on a word it says at the moment? My answer to that is no, I don't. So we'll see how this progresses.
Indeed. Right. Now, good news. Another day, another anti-terrorism campaign by the counter-terrorism unit at the Metropolitan Police. So they're now saying, look again. You've got to always look again and make sure that if you see people walking around with plastic containers that have hazardous labels on them, that you report it. You've got to make sure that if you see people buying hammers in a hardware shop, that you report it. Right? You've got to report it. Well, indeed, it goes on. If you see people taking photographs or video in the street, which might have police walking past, make sure you report that as well. So buying hardware, taking photographs or video, any of these things, you got to make sure because this could be terrorism. So here is the Counter-Terrorism Assistant Commissioner, Neil Basu, saying that since launching the ACT, Action Counters Terrorism campaign, all forces have worked to show communities how they can make a difference, and they make a difference by spying on each other and being scared of each other. And if you happen to have a different color of skin or wear a different type of clothes, then you've got to immediately assume that they're terrorists and be scared of them. Well, Sajid Javid said, with the support of the public, our police and intelligence agencies work tirelessly to keep our communities safe. So I'm feeling much safer already.
Really? Well, that's encouraging to hear. Let's jump straight on to this little report, which is come in locally from Plymouth Live. What really goes on at this GCHQ intelligence and security base? And this is the Bude, GCHQ Bude. It says it's top secret and cannot be publicised due to its sensitive nature. However, it's known that staff at the site work to tackle all sorts of threats, including online bank thefts, distribution of terrorist propaganda, child exploitation, money laundering, drug smuggling, and people trafficking. But these are all areas, Mike, where the crime rate is going up and up and up. So I'm not sure what's going on in this organisation. It's almost as if the more they do, the more the thing that they're looking at increases, but maybe that's a bit cynical. But we take child exploitation. These people had no idea that Jimmy Savile was at work in close proximity to a Prime Minister of the royal family. GCHQ had no idea at all. It's got no idea about the drug smuggling going on with Afghanistan and the increase in the poppy crops. They don't know anything about that, but we pay vast sums of money. Well, is this a real story, or has it been created by a BBC Democracy reporter to promote that government fear factor that you were talking about? We have no idea. So at the moment, when we see stories like this, which are highly pro-government policy, the prevent policy in this case, we have no idea if this is a BBC-generated story or not. But it's worth going and having a look, because they talk about 2 GCHQ employees, and this one, John, says he joined GCHQ in early 2005, straight from university, and was immediately in the thick of things following 7/7 attacks in London, which happened only a few months in my time as a trainee counter-terrorism analyst. And if you go through the text there, it says this: I was promoted in 2008 to become the senior analyst for Al-Qaeda. In this post, I got to travel to conferences overseas and regularly brief ministers on the threat from international terrorism. I also did 2 short tours in JTAC, the Joint Terrorism Analysis Centre in London.
Sorry, so just before you go on, just so that I understand what's happened here, this man joins GCHQ in 2005, straight out of university, and by 2008 he's now the senior analyst for Al-Qaeda?
You've absolutely got it. 3 years from university, when he knew nothing, he gets into this organisation, and in 3 years he's become an expert. Perhaps his level of expertise is the reason why our own MPs have no idea what's actually going on overseas, because people with this level of experience are briefing them. Truly frightening stuff. Does this mean that with 3 years experience in GCHQ, you are responsible for briefing on international drugs trade? That would be an interesting situation. But there we are. Who wrote the article? And we'll end on this one, because this is Mike Veal. Now remember that Mike Veal was the policeman who did all of the investigation into abuse of children by Ted Heath. He worked extremely hard. He was very dedicated. He produced enough evidence to say that if Ted Heath was alive, there was a case to be answered. And the UK column gave this Chief Constable of Wiltshire Police at the time a lot of support, because he was hounded, harassed, threatened and warned off by senior members of the establishment and the British government. And now we've got a character assassination running because he's resigned from his new post in Cleveland Police. Now remember, Cleveland Police have been riddled for years with all sorts of corruption and trouble, but it's quite clear that the press is crowing over the fact that Mike Veal has stepped down. Bring in the Daily Mail. This is an incredible article. Encourage people to read it. It's a crafted story which protects Uncle Teddy Heath. And if you'd like to know the significance of Uncle Teddy, that's what the older children called Ted Heath when they were servicing him. And what have we got in the opening paragraph? A police chief at the centre of the sex probe involving former Prime Minister Edward Heath has quit his new post after less than a year amid fresh allegations of, quote, serious misconduct. And the closing paragraph of the article is that Wiltshire Police concluded that if Sir Edward had been alive, He would have been interviewed about 7 disclosures under criminal caution, but officers stressed no inference of guilt should be drawn from the findings. So clearly this is an article to protect Ted Heath. And I was fascinated to see, if I visited the Twitter page of the journalist, Kevin Donald, he was actually saying this in a quasi-private capacity. Still a mystery at this stage exactly what the allegations are that made Cleveland Police Chief Mike Veal feel he had no choice but to quit. So this journalist is fully aware that at the moment there's no real facts or truth about why why Mike Veal resigned, but he creates an article which not only undermines Mike Veal, it also protects Ted Heath. Amazing journalism, Mike.
Absolutely.
And for those who can't remember, but back in 2013, actually, we were pushing out, the date there should be 2013, we were actually asking for support for a video that the Chief Constable made of his work investigating Ted Heath. And thanks to the support of our viewers, that went up from a few thousand views to, I think, ultimately nearer 20,000. So if you're interested in what Mike Veal has done, he's been extremely brave in doing what he's done to expose Ted Heath, then please give him some support. And we'll end there. Thanks very much for joining us. We will be back on the same time on Wednesday.
Friday.
On Friday. I keep doing this. It's
Yes.
because I missed Monday. Apologies for that. On Friday. We will see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.